As I said, after this discussion session, Giesli will close with a vision for the future. So if you haven't met him already, I'd like to introduce our research assistant, Ryan Burns. He's a PhD dissertator at the University of Washington in Seattle. And Ryan has gone through what you've turned in for your priorities and is going to read through at the top 6, right? So.
I have them all ranked in the back on my computer if you guys are interested in the further ones. But someone give me a signal if I'm talking too loud. This feels really weird, hearing my voice here. So I'm just going to read through the first 5 or 6, and then, like I said, if you're interested in further ones, get in touch with me afterwards. So the first one, the top one that everyone was interested in, was to build workflow models for translating and transforming research into operations. Figure out how to move sandbox to disaster successfully. The second one was think about the different conceptualizations of crowdsourcing, such as the different roles played by the crowd, and the different ways to operationalize this data accordingly. The third research challenge is to determine where government agencies can effectively leverage social networking, crowdsourcing, and other innovations to augment existing information or intelligence and improve decision-making, and conversely, determine where it is not appropriate to leverage social networking. The fourth research challenge is to develop methods and processes to quickly validate and verify crowdsourced data. The fifth one is to decide on the criteria for good policies, and with this information, determine which policies need to be adapted or established. Develop ways for agencies to look ahead in their policy making 5 to 10 years with rapid technological change. Yeah.
Now, are there any interesting write-in candidates?
Actually, yes. I'm glad you mentioned. 3 people mentioned something related to data. 2 of them were explicitly about big data, and so that's something that I hadn't actually thought of, but something that's definitely worth thinking about: how to incorporate big data into what we do, and develop a future workforce for working in data-intensive environments, and quickly assembling data pipelines.
Thank you, Ryan. And with that, Dr. David Applegate from the USGS will lead the conversation on where we think these, what we can do to address these priorities.
All right. Well, first let me just say this has been, for someone who has not been immersed in aspects of this world, this has been both fascinating and inspiring. Certainly, we've heard quite a bit about obstacles, whether security policy or otherwise, that are faced, but also some pretty impressive examples of overcoming them. I did have to step out for part of the morning because over at the White House was doing a safety data palooza, at which they were trying to look at how you can harness some of these big data sets that are made available by government, and how that can be then turned in through the creativity of the crowd into new applications, whether it's on the transportation safety side of things or over on the natural hazard side of things. So I think there's a lot of resonance right now to this notion of finding ways to make it across the boundary from the crowd into authoritative sources. So yeah, we've got a brief time here in which to not only identify grand challenges, but also prioritize them. So this is clearly not going to be a code-a-thon. This is going to be a code sprint, as the terms that I've been learning here. There's a lot of talk about grand challenges. Certainly we heard from USAID, the challenges that they've sent forward. We heard about the one, making all voices count, is one that certainly has resonance for this community. My own involvement with the Subcommittee on Disaster Reduction, where I tried to identify grand challenges for science and technology to address disaster reduction. Things like providing hazard and disaster information when and where it's needed, recognizing and reduce the vulnerability of interdependent critical infrastructure, assessing disaster resilience using standardized methods, that idea of standards that we heard from Captain Geekus yesterday, and then promoting risk-wise behavior. those were some of the ones that we had identified from the standpoint of science technology. What can science technology do to get us towards a more disaster resilient nation? That notion of trying to identify challenges that can get you to a future state is very much shared. I think for this workshop, it mentioned the transforming disaster management, and ultimately, of course, trying to transform lives that are in harm's way in the future. We heard a number of challenges put forward. We heard just now about pulling innovation from around the world into the U.S. We heard about connecting the online and the offline. We heard about how do you bring in the information across the threshold to authoritative information. We heard how do you get to the point where government can rely on crowdsourcing? How do you remove some of the drudgery to encourage volunteers? And how do you make better use of the volunteer technical expert communities and accelerate the error correction process? So we've got a lot of challenges that have been put forward. And I think probably the best use we can come to in this time frame that we have is to explore the ranked challenges that hear your thoughts on, are these the right ones? Are these the grand challenges to get us to that better future? And then maybe we'll actually get to the point of truly prioritizing. I will be very impressed. But certainly, let's get to, this is to be an open dialogue, hear your thoughts here and in the room, and certainly out on the internets, as they say, about what should be our priorities. So maybe first off, thoughts about the priorities that were just read.
Thank you very much. George Chamalis here talking about security initially. I had some great conversations about the difference between technology and policy and which one comes first and what's the most effective way to move those forward. And one question I'd pose to you and to the audience is, what is, when you're in that chicken and the egg problem between developing policy for technology, developing technology that will be able to meet policy, which of those is more important to move forward on first? The sense that we get from a technology standpoint is that we can develop technology really, really fast, and we don't like the idea of having to stop and ask for policies. But once we've developed it, we have the opportunity to then turn around and leverage that in the development of policy. So as the discussions go forward, to think about that distinction between what is policy-driven and what is technology-driven.
And can I just add to that? I think there's more. And what is practice-driven, which is another thing we've been hearing about, and certainly one that I advocate.
Mm-hmm. John? Yeah, I'll add to that practice-driven. That was one of the points made, and indeed it might have been in your presentation, about letting the problems of emergency managers come to the fore and let that really drive that. So it's a good point.
I think what we just heard from the last panel was looking at design thinking and how we can think through the problems, not just as the typical method of divide it, parse it, come out into an individual intervention that can be done and then measure it, but how do we see it as a system? How do we understand the interactions that happen around the processes of us creating this innovation workflow, and how that leads to certain changes to behavior, and how those changes to behavior lead to new concepts which we can bring back into a workflow? Where are the feedback loops? Mm-hmm. How do we understand that structure, and how do we understand that how interventions at certain parts of the system may have non-linear effects, and which ones actually give us the best leverage, not just what's going to give us something that we can measure the output of by doing one intervention.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that might link back nicely with one of the points I think that Nigel was making about the in terms of the system, it's connecting the online and the offline if you're really going to make a difference. Additional thoughts?
BK DeLong, technologist. And that's one of the points that I tried to make, I think, in the security panel around collecting metrics for process enhancement, and being open to collecting information both before, during, and after disaster response for the purpose of looking back, not because every disaster is different, but if things are a success and or a failure, how can we change based on that?
Comment over here.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment that this is Kat Graham with Humanity Road. We're on the Broward County Citizen Corps Council, and one of the things that they developed was the to submit your damage assessments, a very simple mobile app, and then found out that a lot of the counties in Florida wanted to develop an app for this, which this app was just really useful for just about any county. So I think that in identifying the workflow models of moving from research into operations is also looking at what's already being innovative at the ground level already for the USA in the field that can be borrowed and spread across to say that's a good standard and maybe we can share this across. So, and that might speed up moving it from research into ops.
Right, back to that standards issue. That's key, yeah.
I actually added a write-in, which I didn't get a chance to hand out, but
David Green from
David
NOAA.
Green from NOAA Weather Service was actually research to decision making, because we've kind of we've done the transition to applications and operations, but it really hasn't done what we want to do. We want to really drive decision making, and but one of the things I wanted to point out at this side, and I think this is part of the discussion we've had. The U.S. has always looked at things as often with the technology solution. There was a comment made before about technology is maybe just 1% of the solution. I think with the crowdsourcing and social media, there is a need for a policy change, because our policy has been driven by that perception that technology is the hammer that we've always come to solve disaster management with. I think it's shifting. I think with crowdsourcing, what we're doing, and I'm going to draw another word that was brought up today, enabling. No longer does any one agency or one group have the hammer anymore. There's a lot of people enabling things, and that's a new mindset for many of us who thought our agency, our organization had the solution. We were the ones delivering this. We were the ones in the lead. Now, a lot of us are learning to take a back seat and saying our role is to enable, and especially with crowdsourcing, bringing everyone else on board. It used to be a three-legged stool of federal agencies and NGOs, and academia, and now we've got everyone contributing. So I think there's a policy shift to this enabling. I think that's got to be a priority, to make that clear. I think there's a priority to understand we've put a lot of our money, time, and investment into the technology. We've got to shift that into the social science, away from just the physical science, and rebalance the portfolio to move forward. I think the crowdsourcing and social media is changing the way we do business. So,
yeah, we certainly heard that yesterday. Talk of the word to government: open up your data. Don't necessarily be the one generating those applications. Obviously, the standards being a real opportunity there. That was very much the message of this safety data palooza. Was exactly that: government make the data available, and put it in the right, in often cases, the form that can be broadly used, but then turn them loose.
I actually want to follow up on David Chris's point. A lot of the tools that seem available to govies are contracting mechanisms, channels, policies that allow for individual interventions. There's a method of acquire the tool that does the job, or with the Americas Competes Act, force a bunch of organizations to get to a winning tool to meet the need. A lot of the problems that we're talking about not only have incredibly complex ecosystems around them that require interventions at multiple points, but they're also incredibly complex and wicked problems in the disaster space that actually require also interventions at multiple points. Can we get the equivalent of the Americas Competes Act for a mashup act? How does a federal employee create an ecosystem of solutions and catalyze that reaction so that a complex interaction or complex intervention is possible, and it can be designed in a collaborative way so there are multiple partners as part of the design process.
Well, I think if you can get Alan Alda to be your spokesman for the Mashup Act.
It even has a theme song.
Got popularity right there. Additional either comments on this current group, emergent group from the list, or additional any walk-ins from the discussions. Shadrach.
This really isn't a grand challenge, or maybe it is. I think it's a recurring minor challenge that always comes out of these discussions. And I would just ask how collectively as a community, or even this particular group of people, can capture the knowledge we already have about all these issues. There's been a lot of discussion at different points when people have said, oh, hey, we've dealt with that, or I've dealt with that, or I wrote a paper on that, or we have a study on that. I'm not sure exactly what the answer to that is. I've been with lots of different groups that tried different things, from, hey, this is a container, we're all going to put our stuff in it. That generally doesn't work. I think that there already kind of are some different solutions to bits and pieces of this already, and we just need to work on plugging it together. The conference itself, of course, is a way to do that, so that's why this is a great space. But I think that's something we could all think about, is how do we make what we're learning discoverable and open to the rest of the community? Because I think that's a big part of it, is just sharing what you go through in that process.
Well, and as we heard, it certainly is a recurring one. We heard back to 1947, the information explosion might not be accompanied by a knowledge explosion to keep up with it. So no, I think not minor at all. So.
I was going to add that we're also thinking about starting a listserv where you guys can all participate and report results, report different things that are happening in your communities and research and stuff.
Well, we're thinking to engage the federal folks in that discussion,
Yeah.
so that they could draw on expertise of folks like yourself. Or they could just join crisis mappers, let's get ready.
I wanted to echo the path that these last few comments have gone, and that is that the level of expertise in very specialized area of knowledge within this atmosphere we've created is wonderful, and it's rare, and it's not something that me and my path come across very often. So having the opportunity to use folks here as a sounding board and to help identify either problem areas or to be able to advise us on where to turn, or maybe help get us on track in ways that we can avoid some of those obstacles would be so helpful.
Yeah, I think we're all in USAID's debt for actually writing through the process that you went through, and we need more of that plans. The comment was we need somewhere to put it all. Yes.
Yeah. About a month ago, I attended the first citizen science meeting in Portland, Oregon, and the meeting was organized by folks from Cornell, the ornithology lab, and there are about 300 participants. I see the topics that we're discussing in this workshop have quite a bit of overlap with that group. Maybe I would suggest, Ryan, Leah, maybe I have the contact information. You can, especially for your listserv. The latest I heard is they are in a process of forming a national organization. So that's a quite a sizable community. I think we.
I went to that event as well, and I agree with you 100%.
Oh, you were there? You were there. Oh, I forgot about that.
Thanks, everybody, for the opportunity to be here. I sort of wanted to second what Shadrach was saying, and I think also some others around this idea of we have all this information, and sort of the ecosystem is broader than this. It's broader than crisis mappers even. I know people have talked about that in terms of the information that's available. And I'm wondering, it's almost as if I want each of us and everybody else in that sort of space to have their own personal assistant whose full-time job is to like go and get the one piece of information that like you in particular really need. So something deeper than just like looking for tags, or, because you could do a keyword search and you can get 100 articles and no one has time for that. So it's about how do you get that like one piece of information to that one specific person. So it's obviously maybe not a person, right? But the question is there an algorithm? Is there a machine? Is there a tool that's something like that, that's in process, already built, something I don't know about, something that we could think about? Because I think it's a problem of being overwhelmed by too much data. So we put more in the bucket, but it doesn't mean I'm going to read it, frankly, because I don't know what's the piece that's relevant really just for me. And I know all of it's good for learning, There's only so much time in the day. That's my point.
I think each person having a personal assistant does represent a grand challenge. So that's, you've hit on one. That's right.
I think this is an interesting question that we're seeing as a dilemma. Granted, I'm a researcher, but there's simple tools that help us that are well designed. But when I have a problem and it's late at night and I've spent 30 minutes trying to find it and I can't, I just crowdsource it. I send it out to my networks, and somebody in the network knows. If we're creating connections here and we're connected in different ways, we can actually assist people if they're looking for something in particular. I'll respond to you. If you email me, I need some research on this. If you're following me on Twitter, I'll get you right back, and if I have that information. So we're talking about crowdsourcing. That's what we should be doing,
From the responder side, there's a similar question. We've invested an incredible amount of money in building new ICT systems to allow us to have greater bandwidth in the field. Similarly, we've created this explosion of information that now can flow into the responders' very limited capacity. But that flow of creating stuff that's now data to be analyzed into the stock of things that are actually actionable, that place where we need to have computers and humans interacting in a feedback loop, reinforcing each other, augmenting each other, that capability is something that we haven't invested all that much in. And I think that's too big of an area to say invest in that, but I think it's investigate what needs to be, what enables decision making, what are going to be the biggest high win areas in that bucket.
Maybe that's the design concepts which have not been fully exploited except by a few.
I'd like to ask a question. Number one was build workflow for transforming researched operations, moving the sandbox to disaster. Over the next year, what are some actionable steps we can take to improve that transition?
One of the things that I've thought that I might be able to do to help is to lay out a first edition of a framework for tracking the information and the community and the relationships building a small, simple to understand framework that describes each of the stages separately. Because I think one of the things that I hear a lot of in here is conflation of related issues. And so I think naming the process and having a decent high-level abstract framework in which to describe the language that we use to talk about it by next year would be an admirable goal and improve, hopefully, the functional results of the work that everybody else does.
Another concrete sort of way forward is that if people are interested in the classes of problems that UNICEF is working with, particularly around the registration, some of the information movement, and want to join those projects and those endeavors, we would certainly open up a few of those spaces to partners or collaborations. And I can talk about that through John or individually with people afterwards.
I was just going to say ditto. Now we have an open door policy for test beds, for being a test bed, because we're like not really like any other organization in what we're doing and what our mission statement is. So in a lot of aspects, we model what a lot of our emergency management agencies are wanting to do. So we welcome them to either come in and study us, come in and work with us, or even the academic, to come in and do some sort of test rollout. the volunteers are very open for that.
One thing that I'd like to see on moving from the sandbox to the actual operations, a lot of the work that we do through the relief program at the Naval Postgraduate School and the National Defense University falls into that bucket. How do we take something from sort of a wires hanging out prototype to something that we can now begin to at least do an initial deployment and pilot it? We've been pretty alone. It's been underfunded. It's been something that has gone funding almost quarter to quarter, but we've made it happen. There needs to be more of that in more areas run by more agencies. How do we catalyze that? How do we create those sandboxes where we can have these type of open collaborative environments like Chris described and like we've tried to describe a little bit with relief? How do we create those neutral spaces where agencies can come into an environment that models what is going to find in the field without necessarily all of the austerities, but enough to strain the technology and enough to create a neutral space so they can bring in the non-traditional partners, the UN, the places where we have these analogs from around the world and expose agency to a very different way of thinking, and then catalyze that, bring it to by quarter, moving it through the TRL cycle, get it closer and closer to the point where we can pilot it.
Yeah, that's you know, of course, listening to you talk about relief and you know the exactly how do other agencies create a space given that we're not going to have 30,000 acres in restricted airspace, you know, but you don't need it exactly. But how to approach that in different scales? Over here, please.
So, Luis Benuez from OGC. So OGC does test beds. And in these test beds, we allow government agencies and others to participate together to move forward technologies and see if the standards work or not. And the reason that I'm here is because the test bed number 9 was the first time that we tried to use crowdsourced data with traditional geospatial sources. Now, answering your question is next year we are going to have testbed number 10, and the requirements come from communities like this, right? USGS and NGA are not putting a lot of funding on this activity, but there is a funding that almost every year comes to OGC to fund some kind of cool projects, like for example, hey, can we bring Twitter, Usahiri, and OpenStreet data, and that's what we're doing now. So OpenGeo got funded to do that work, for example. Members and other participants from around the world respond to the RFQ that OGC puts in place, and they do the work. So we have 50 participants around the world. So CubeWorks, for example, in Canada is making available USGS data from the US. We have people in Australia, LisaSoft, advancing WMS clients, for example. So once we have the list, I can share more information if there are requirements and people are interested in knowing more about how to maybe get funded by OGC testbeds or how to be a sponsor. I'm here and I can send the information if a list is created.
Someone right behind. Yep, Kisi.
Paulin Stotter first.
Okay.
So we're talking about the production of products and technologies and policies and ways of doing things, but we have to also produce the people who are able to keep growing this, what's becoming a very mature community around these ideas. We've moved so far beyond, even from a year ago or so, of in some cases, as you all know, what is a social media thing and can we stop it? To, okay, social computing seems like there's something here. Now, what are the really hard and interesting questions about that? So that might go to the young practitioners, the young policymakers, the young lawyers, and also the upcoming researchers, and supporting things as the initiative that Robin Murphy and Trevor Darrell led to seek funding from the NSF and other kinds of government agencies, because part of that is also important for creating a next generation of scholars, both at the bachelor's level and the master's and the PhD levels, to be able to do this kind of work too.
And I was very struck. I think the efforts, it's really in the sort of computer science side of NSF that Robin spoke about. I mean, that's we can expand that to other parts, whether the foundation or other funding agencies. I mean, I think that's a real model for, and certainly one we want to encourage.
As a PhD student, I agree.
Shorey Elhami, GIS Corps. I just wanted to echo what Kat said. Our organization has GIS experts. So if any of you guys here are interested in having some sort of a test, either to do brand new projects or if you have crowds, just like we participated in USAID project, and if you want our volunteers to become the expert crowdsourcers, so to speak, to go and quality control, to find out how well things were done, we're here, my card's here, and I'll be happy to talk with you afterwards.
There and
yeah, I'm Gisli Olafsson from NetHope, as you probably know by now. We've seen over the last couple of years a lot of things happening in this space, but unfortunately a lot of them are disparate things that are being driven forward by different organizations, some of them without funds, some of them by pure passion of volunteers. And we all know that this is something that needs to change. And over the last year or so, we've been working hard on putting together an initiative along with a number of other organizations, many of who are represented here, who have expressed interest in participating with us. And we've been going out to the donor community, the global humanitarian donors and others, and presenting this to them, saying, this is an important step. This is something that we need to do. We need to improve how we deal with information, whether it's crowdsourced or whether it's between our organizations, or whether it's between governments and relief organizations. And we're getting a lot of traction with the donors right now. We have created formal proposals for them for a 5-year initiative. You know, you need to have very formal and nice-looking proposals for the bean counters and those donors to be happy to go forward with them. I would like to invite any of you who have not heard about this initiative that we call the Open Humanitarian Initiative to ask me about it. And since it has the word open in the front, we're very open about it, including sharing the proposal drafts and everything. It is internationally focused, but the interesting part is that whenever I introduce it, I get a lot of domestic focus, domestic interest, including some of the higher-ups in organizations like DHS and FEMA, who say, why are you wondering about the international space? We need this. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration there. It's all based on the fact that we want to collaborate together around this. We know that if we don't let that organizational competitiveness that so often stops us from doing things, and we don't leave that outside the door when we get in here and we start working together, then we're never going to get there. So if you're interested in knowing more, I'm the guy to talk to, or John. John knows a lot about it too.
I think David was waiting, and Bartel. And Chris, you've been waiting a really long time.
I'll make it quick if I can. This is kind of in response to the thoughts there about the students and such. I lead an effort under the American Meteorological Society. I raised this issue of crowdsourcing to that enterprise. We call it an enterprise because it's government and commercial and private and academic. And I said, we need to take a look at this seriously. And recently we had a meeting where we bring in, just like this, kind of, senior people. We'll all consider ourselves expert in a certain thing. And I said, one of the things I wanted to do, and we had this at the University of Oklahoma, I said, I want to have an evening with grad students. And we put grad students all up in the middle of the room, surrounded by all of us experts and experienced people. And we asked them questions. And these were all 20s to 25s. And it was eye-opening. They have ideas. They have solutions. It's not just that they need to learn and be ready. Many of them have ready to educate us. And it was fascinating. We asked them about how many apps do they use? Where do they get the ideas from? Where do they think they're going? Even what program are they in school? They're not in many students are not in the traditional programs that many of us grew up in. They're in very interdisciplinary ideas because they know it's going to take to answer these questions. So I was encouraging this idea that as we go forward, whenever we meet and gather like this, there was incredible value by having these students involved. And one of the things, and I told Leah about this a little bit, but one of the lessons learned was very interesting, was they said, you know, we're 22, 25. I've got a younger brother and sister who's like 16, 17. That's another generation of crowdsourcing and social media from where I am today. And so it's moving very quickly. But I would encourage us to look in the next year about mechanisms to not only think about getting them educated, but actually engaging them in these test beds, in these projects, in group methods, if that's possible.
If I could just add to that real quickly, one of the things that I'm hearing around the table a lot is this interest in gathering the multiple kinds of people together in the same room. And so it's important to keep having these kinds of conversations where we get researchers and practitioners and policymakers all in the same room. And in terms of academia, and you're right, a lot of this stuff is being very interdisciplinary. And so on the academic side, which is where I'm coming from, I'd like to also stress that the interdisciplinarity is very important as well.
Where's the... No, you go first.
Okay. I'm just going to make this really quick. I just wanted to offer, if there's anyone who needs to test something, kind of like what Kat and what you were talking about, but you're talking about groups of volunteers, but if you need an incident, I have incidents. So what I'm saying is, you know, it's sort of a mutual thing. I don't have a lot of opportunity when we're in the middle of all of this to do the wide scale monitoring of how well we've done. I'm interested in what you all are doing. I have the incident you need to test it on. If you need to test it on something small before you do some giant humanitarian effort in Africa, I have the small incident somewhere local. If you need to send people into the field to test something, we're part of the NEMO mission is innovation, and I'm happy to either set you up with one of our teams or with other fire teams in the field that you can go there for 2 weeks and camping, you know, go camping and eat bad food and test whatever it is. Or if you want to do it virtually, I'm happy to tell you what we're doing, where we're doing it. So, but anything you do that way will help us learn more and be able to. We're still in the proof of concept stage with our agencies. So anything that you guys are doing that can help us do that would be appreciated. So I'm on Twitter. It's very secret under my name, Chris Erickson. So if you need to find me or you want a card, please contact me.
I think a final comment, then we'll need to shift to the vision.
Oh, okay. It's my turn. Yeah, right. I have the mic. I think I'm happy to hear that we are identifying some key challenges and problems, and as from the academic sector, I think Licia and I and the other academics here are fully aware that we need also to think about our mode of interaction. I mean, it really hurts my feelings that I hear that you have no time to read my papers. Spend so much time writing them. So we need to think about new models of presenting our work to you guys who have less time, want to hear about our work, but won't read the papers. And that's one of the things we need to change. Jen and I have also been talking about publishing our work. Do we still need to go to these journals that take 1 year or longer to get the thing published? What kind of creative thing can we do? Can we crowdsource some of the things, as you suggested, Kate? But then we are in trouble with our academic institutions because they don't believe in that kind of way. So let's think also about ways we can interact better among each other. And that's a final comment. And I'm glad at Gisley that things are maybe scaling up with your initiative, because we are also sticking or getting stuck a little bit in anecdotal things too often. I hear some of the things here today and yesterday that I've heard 5 years ago. Actually, that I've heard in 2007. Was it 5 years ago? Yeah, same thing. When the UN OCHA had that global symposium +5, it was every 5 year symposium. Many of the things that were said then, I can hear them again today. So let's try to get out of this model that we sort of keep reiterating the same examples and the same problems. Let's sort of try to move on
Whereas Leah, I think you did a great job in bringing all of us together. I mean, so much collective intelligence here. So I hope that you can continue this effort and make it into something tangible and workable. So thanks, first of all. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you to all of you. Yes, I think that thanks actually ought to turn into a.
And I in turn would thank all my fantastic staff, Allie, Elise, Ryan, Zach, Joe, Aaron, Jessica, who's not here right now, and the steering committee, and our co-sponsors, ESRI, Tech Change, ISCRAM, NetHope, Project Epic, National Alliance for Public Safety, GIS Foundation. I hope I haven't missed anybody. So we've got 2 more questions here, and then we will have to move to Gisli.
Thank you. I wanted to maybe kind of float an idea about a format possibly for a future conversation with similar people, or not the same people, maybe more people. Naval Postgraduate School, Center for Homeland Defense and Security, where I did my work in this topic area, they held a conference. It was called the AGMA conference. It was a 2-day workshop. And what they did was they organized people kind of by disciplines. So they had a group of the emergency managers were part of a group. They had another group that was made up of technology developers and people within that sector. And then they had a third group that was comprised of people who work in human behaviors and societal or maybe even academics. And so those 3 groups, they put them together and held I think they were at least 2-hour-long sessions with just interfacing 2 of those groups in the same room together, and then they rotated. So they ended up having 3 sessions of really detailed, full amounts of just open discussion and dialogue, and seeing what was captured as being the needs and the gaps and possible solution sets. It was kind of that think tank environment that we're always kind of looking for, but it gave a little more detailed ability to explore things in a more fleshed out way. So I just thought I would share that because it's resonated with me as something that created a lot of really rich context and dialogue and future thinking.
So I would like to see a simulation with whatever volunteer technical communities or folks that have use cases wanted to bring with their actual data and their laptops and things like that, but in conjunction with the security folks. Now, I don't know about the feasibility funding concerns and politics of this, but I'd love to see some folks that were really smart on security sort of sit behind our shoulders and see, specifically that might be an issue, maybe this is a workaround, just to start building those kind of relationships. It might be very worthwhile. Yeah, thanks.
I think the cybersecurity issue is definitely of great interest here at the Wilson Center, and I've already talked to a couple of the panelists about continuing that conversation here so that we can provide that expertise to the community.
I'll close this session, this part, noting that there are clearly plenty of challenges, but it is written somewhere that without vision, the people will perish. So I think with that, we should transition over to Gisli.
And while I'm loading my slides, John.
So, actually, that would be great. So I did want to actually echo a comment which Bartel started a little more sooner than I actually had expected, with thanking Leah for taking what was originally a fairly small idea that we wanted to bring a group together and start looking at what the issues were around grassroots to governance, and to turn it into a conference which I think we've delved pretty deeply into some pretty amazing issues with all equally good panels. So I wanted to take this moment to really, after this started really back in May, and then became an idea in early June when I first was privileged enough to come to the center, and she's worked all summer long tirelessly on this. I won't guess how many thousand emails have gone back and forth at ridiculous hours of the night. So I just wanted to provide this opportunity for everyone to thank Leah for an incredible job well done.
I've had an incredible time talking with each and every one of you. I hope you all stay in touch throughout this next year, and we'll see what we do next year. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Gisli.
Thanks, Leah. I warned you earlier about the fact that I'm Icelandic. And we don't know political correctness. It's not in our blood. So some of the things I may be saying are a little bit politically incorrect, but they are nevertheless need to be said. When Leah asked me to give a vision of the future, I wanted to kind of try to give all of you a bit of an insight into the things that will happen. Big question we have is, will we catch up? Or will we be like this poor turtle in this nice cartoon, far behind what's actually happening and not realizing and not be able to respond soon enough? And one of the things that I like to talk about, and I'll admit I steal it from the author of Wikinomics and Macroeconomics, Don Tapscott, is the fact that we're using organizations built in the industrial age to deal with problems in the information age. And the rules and the principles that apply to addressing problems in the information age are different than what we were used to do just a few years back. And what has changed just in the last few years is more change than we have seen over the previous 50 years. And for us in this space, it's particularly changing. Now, interestingly enough, a few years back, it took two different disasters. One was the tsunami, the other one was Katrina, for both the U.S. and the international community to kind of rethink their frameworks for working. And the reasons they changed was because they realized that what had worked the previous decades wasn't applicable anymore. In the UN case, for example, all of a sudden a lot more organizations showed up to Banda Aceh than ever before to any disaster. Now let me tell you what the number of organizations that showed up to Banda Aceh were not even 1/5 or 1/6 of what showed up in Haiti. So even though we created these great models 5 years ago, or 8 years ago, or 7 years ago, I'm like Bartel, not good in the math, the changes that have happened since then are so big, especially when it comes to information and connectivity and social networking and so on, that we must be willing to look at the frameworks that we have been working on and look at them with new eyes. And looking at a number of sources, there are a number of principles that we have in the information age which help us guide things or guide our thinking around what we should focus on, or what kind of things we should look at when we want to try to improve what we had before. Now remember, I said before that these are institutions of the industrial age. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, can all of them actually be improved, or do new ones come instead? I'll leave that up to you to answer. But let's go through each one of them. I love this little quote about the fact that it's more difficult to change what already worked, but it has changed so quickly over the last few years. You know, if a few years ago we told FEMA, oh yeah, you need to use these nice sirens for warning people about a possible threat, they would have said, of course. If you say today, hey, let's use SMS or mobile phones or reverse 911, they go like, yes, of course. What are they going to say a couple of years from now? But they just spent $5 million, well, $50 million or whatever the amount is on building a brand new system. that's probably going to be outdated by the time it gets there, because we have thought of new ways of communicating and new ways of doing things. And we got to figure out, as part of that, how do we deal with that? And the innovation that we do has to be applicable. I mean, I love this little thing. It's not about the gadgets we have. It's not about having all the tools and toys when we go out into the field and we respond, because we also got to think about the fact that we have to use them for something that helps the affected communities. And one of the key things I want to stress, we've heard it again and again and again here, affected communities. Stop thinking about what your organization needs and start thinking about what the affected communities need. Because you can create fantastic systems for yourself, but if they don't do something for the affected community, they're going to do something by themselves. Another thing we've talked a lot about here is crowdsourcing and crowd tasking and other things. And mass collaboration, the ability to take tasks that before were impossible to do and throw them out to a crowd of hundreds or thousands of people who can take those boring tasks and break them down into something. It's amazing. And if you start thinking about outside of the box, no, that can't be done, no, that can't be done. Yes, it can be. We now have experts. We can talk to GIS experts and ask them to do things for us. We can talk to the volunteer teams and get them to do things for us. We got to leverage that passion and that power, and we got to have the interfaces in place. We need to have, like I said on Twitter, the local virtual operations support team in every county. Everybody can set that up. We need to teach them how to do that and enable them to do that easily. And we need to look back a little bit, and we need to realize also that it's about, again, the affected communities. Listen to what their needs are and figure out innovative use of mass collaboration, crowdsourcing, and other things to serve their needs predominantly, not just your needs. Because by serving their needs, you'll actually be able to do your job better. We've all seen this little word graph of the words that came out of Haiti. Which one of those words are you actually listening to when you're sitting inside your operations center? Are you actually listening to the community, or are you just responding the way you've always responded, just because it worked a year ago? Openness. I mentioned earlier about our Open Humanitarian initiative, which is about opening up data. It's about opening up data that the government has to the other responders. It's about opening up what the responders have with each other. It's about opening it up towards the affected communities, because then they can help themselves much better. Then we can do our work better. We need to have that as a mantra in everything we're doing here. And we need to break down the silos that exist today. And those silos often are not technological. They're very often political. It's about the willingness to share. And the governments in many countries, like here in the US, are doing a great job with like data.gov. But where's the NGO data? Where's the first responder data? We've got to start sharing that as well. And when we start doing that, we start doing things that get us away from some of the stupid things we're spending time on right now. I mean, I go to disaster areas, and we end up sending out endless situation reports or reports to the donor about the great work we're doing. We actually spend probably 80% of the time writing the reports or collecting the data for it or monitoring and evaluating things, and then 20% on actually doing the stuff. And in some organizations, especially ones that have coordination as part of their role, that becomes 95%, and 5% is actually doing some real work. But if we open things up, and we open ourselves up for scrutiny, we can lower the amount of work we're doing around monitoring and evaluation of whether people are using the funds correctly, because it's all transparent. And then other people who are interested in that, you know, Accountants Without Borders can go and really start finding the fact that we were not using the money correctly. Because right is about integrity is about doing the right thing when nobody is watching. Well, if the system keeps track of everything we're doing, if everything is open, then integrity becomes what we do. I also think that our structures of response in here in the U.S. it's the ICS and the NIMS. You will start to see them break down, and they will become much more self-organized and much less hierarchical than they are today. And why? It's because people will start being able to communicate with each other at the individual level, both within the communities, but also within the first response communities, where instead of waiting for the orders to come down, we can start solving the problems here and enabling people at the edge to make the decisions. There was a great paper written back in 2003 for the military about how new kind of doing military warfare was about enabling the individuals at the edge to make the decisions through better information because we now have communication. We need to learn from that and understand that first responders need to have much more ability to make decisions, and then because we keep track of their decisions and we can audit them and we can view them, that's how we get the integrity and everything else we need. So less waiting for the answer from the first responder who asks for a power generator in Galveston, Texas, after Hurricane Ike, to use to put electricity into the operations center, and the FEMA person says, sorry, that request has to go first to the county, then to the state, then to the FEMA, and then down. I'm sorry, we don't do business like that anymore. The city of Galveston called a company that rents out these things and got one much quicker than it would have gone up the bureaucracy. We need to enable those field people to make those decisions without having to go through all of the bureaucracy that we used to have to do because we didn't have the tracking of information. They didn't have the information. Only information was available at the top. And we will see this self-organization happening where private sector, where communities will start responding much quicker themselves than necessarily the response organizations that have done a lot of the work until now. And this is all about making this sustainable in the long run. And we need to have ways in which when we're doing these things that it's not something that only works for now, but actually makes that community more resilient than it used to be. Yeah, cartoons speak for themselves. To wrap up, there's a lot of old people in this room. When I say old, I mean it's because we're not the digital generation. We need the young people, like you mentioned before, who've grown up around this technology, that have never been offline, actually. Because very soon they're going to start infiltrating every one of your organization. And they're going to make these changes happen. But there are a few of us who are here in this room, at least, that's why you came, I hope, that understand that this change is about to happen and that we need to be the ones who are making that change happen. And we may be laughed at first, but if we want to be the change, I'll end with my favorite quote. It starts here. So go out, change the world, and start making this vision a reality so that next time we meet, some of the stuff I've talked about isn't futuristic or strange or politically incorrect to say, but actually the way we do things. Thank you.
Thank you, Gisli, for a fantastic, inspirational talk. So with that, we will close this session. Feel free to stick around and talk with each other. The building doesn't close for another 2 hours. So also, for those of you who have traveled here with Allie having made the arrangements, do talk to her before you leave about the receipts and such for reimbursement. And with that, safe travels, and I hope we're all in touch soon. We will be following up with hopefully putting the PowerPoint slides online, hopefully producing a summary report for you all to provide feedback on. And then we'll talk about next steps based on these priorities and how the Commons Lab at the Wilson Center might be able to contribute and help organize people towards that. And Eric, you had a last statement. Within your packet had all the names of all the people that participated, plus their bios of everyone who attended. I don't know that we can release the emails without folks' permission, but if everyone in the room raises their hand, it's okay, we can do that. Well. Okay. Okay. Well, we had talked about a mailing list. We didn't want to create duplication of this crisis mappers, but if this group feels that a listserv amongst this group of experts would be useful, we'd be happy to set something up. Okay, we'll do that. Will do. All right, thank you very much, all.